The rain started just as I realized I had been sitting there for over an hour, watching the same 2 drops of water race each other down the cafe window like they had somewhere to be, unlike me. My phone screen stayed dark, no messages, no apologies, no, I'm on my way. Just silence. The kind that presses against your chest and makes you feel foolish for hoping. I checked the time again, even though I already knew. She wasn't coming. My date had stood me up, and somehow, the empty chair across from me felt louder than any crowded room. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unexpected ways life can turn around, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to The Kindness Chronicles. You never know who might need a story like this today. I remember thinking that night couldn't get worse. I had rehearsed conversations in my head, picked out the least wrinkled shirt I owned, even arrived 15 minutes early like some overeager fool who still believed effort mattered. The cafe smelled like roasted coffee beans and warm pastries, and couples filled the space with laughter that felt almost rehearsed in its perfection. I sat there pretending I wasn't waiting, pretending I hadn't checked the door every time it opened. But hope has a way of betraying you slowly, peeling itself away minute by minute until all that's left is embarrassment. I finally stood up, ready to leave, when the chair across from me scraped slightly. I froze, heart jumping in a way that felt almost desperate, but when I looked up, it wasn't her. It was someone else entirely. A girl I had never seen before, damp from the rain, her hair clinging slightly to her face, her expression somewhere between awkward and determined. She hesitated before sitting down, as if unsure whether she had the right to be there, but then she looked directly at me with a kind of honesty that felt disarming. What happened next didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like the universe quietly rearranging things while I was too busy being disappointed to notice. She told me, in the simplest way possible, that she was the roommate. That my date had mentioned me earlier, casually, almost dismissively, before deciding not to come. There was no dramatic excuse, no emergency, just a shrugging indifference that somehow stung more than any elaborate lie could have. The roommate had overheard it, had seen something in the situation that didn't sit right with her, and for reasons she couldn't fully explain, she grabbed her coat and came anyway. At first, I didn't know how to react. There was something surreal about it, like I had stepped into the wrong version of the evening. I should have been angry or embarrassed or even amused, but instead, I just felt seen. Not in a grand, life-changing way, but in a quiet, human way that said someone had noticed my disappointment and decided it mattered. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She didn't pretend to be anything she wasn't. She just sat there, slightly out of breath from the rain, and offered me something simple: company, honesty, and an unexpected kind of kindness. The conversation started slowly, the way all fragile things do. We talked about small things at first, things that felt safe and unimportant. The weather, the cafe, the strange unpredictability of people. But beneath it all, there was an unspoken understanding that neither of us had planned to be there together. And somehow, that made everything feel more real. As the minutes passed, something shifted. The embarrassment I had been carrying began to loosen its grip. The weight of being stood up didn't disappear, but it softened, like a wound that had finally been acknowledged instead of ignored. She listened in a way that felt rare, not interrupting, not trying to fix anything, just letting me be human in a moment that had felt painfully isolating. She told me things too, not in a dramatic, confessional way, but in fragments that slowly formed a picture. She wasn't perfect. She had her own struggles, her own disappointments, her own reasons for understanding what it felt like to be overlooked or dismissed. There was a quiet resilience in her, something that didn't need to announce itself but was impossible to ignore once you noticed it. Time moved differently that night. The rain outside turned from a steady downpour into a gentle rhythm, and the cafe began to empty as people drifted out into their own lives. But we stayed, caught in a moment that neither of us had expected but both of us seemed unwilling to end. I realized at some point that I had stopped checking my phone. The person I had been waiting for had faded into the background, replaced by someone who had actually shown up, not because she had to, but because she chose to. That realization hit deeper than I expected. There's something powerful about being chosen, especially when you're used to being an afterthought. We left the cafe together, stepping out into the cool night air that still carried the scent of rain. The streets glistened under the streetlights, reflecting everything in soft, distorted patterns that made the world feel almost dreamlike. We walked without a clear destination, just letting the conversation carry us forward. There were moments of silence, but they didn't feel awkward. They felt comfortable, like pauses in a song that make the music more meaningful when it resumes. I found myself noticing small things, the way she looked at the world as if she was always searching for something deeper, the way she laughed quietly, like she wasn't used to being the center of attention. She wasn't trying to impress me. And maybe that's what made everything about her feel so genuine. At some point, we found ourselves sitting on a bench overlooking a quiet street. The city had slowed down, the noise fading into something distant and manageable. It was there, in that stillness, that the night shifted again. She admitted something then, something that lingered in the air between us. She said she almost didn't come. That she had stood by the door for several minutes, questioning whether it was her place to step into someone else's story. But something about the way my date had spoken, so casually, so dismissively, had unsettled her. She couldn't ignore it. And so she didn't. That simple decision changed everything. I thought about how easily that night could have ended differently. How I could have left the cafe feeling rejected, carrying that weight with me into the days and weeks ahead. How she could have stayed home, convincing herself it wasn't her responsibility. But neither of those things happened. Instead, we ended up there, sharing a moment that felt small on the surface but carried a quiet kind of significance beneath it. Life doesn't always give you grand, cinematic turning points. Sometimes, it gives you something quieter, a chance encounter, an unexpected kindness, a moment where someone chooses to show up when they don't have to. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. The weeks that followed weren't perfect or dramatic. There were no sweeping declarations or instant transformations. But there was something steady, something real. We kept meeting, not out of obligation, but because we wanted to. The conversations deepened, the silences grew more comfortable, and the connection that had started so unexpectedly began to take root in a way that felt natural. I learned more about her, about the quiet strength she carried, about the way she had learned to navigate disappointment without letting it harden her. And in turn, I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't expected, letting go of the guardedness that had built up over time. It wasn't about replacing the person who hadn't shown up. It was about discovering something entirely different, something that couldn't have existed if things had gone according to plan. That realization stayed with me. Sometimes, the things that don't work out are the very things that make room for what truly matters. Months later, I found myself back at that same cafe, sitting at the same table, but everything felt different. The chair across from me wasn't empty this time. She was there, smiling in that quiet way that had first caught my attention, her presence turning an ordinary moment into something meaningful. I thought about that night, about the rain, about the disappointment that had felt so overwhelming at the time. And I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. That night wasn't about being stood up. It was about being shown something better. It was about learning that kindness can come from the most unexpected places, that people can surprise you in ways you never saw coming, and that sometimes, the universe has a way of redirecting you when you're too focused on the wrong path. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the unexpected kindness in your own life, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that things can change in the most beautiful ways. And before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment where something that seemed like a disappointment turned into something meaningful? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today.